Okay, so as I mentioned, this is for a speech I had to give. It was about 45 minutes, and there was some about 15 minutes after that of Q&A. And I had to deliver the speech on April 19th of 2011 here. So you'll notice that the short outline, the last version, was actually polished up and sent out on that day. And that's really the outline I used for the, if I referenced notes, I had them there. But so I started on the speech 11 days before I delivered it. Probably should have started earlier, but hey, we all get into that area. So once again, I've got here on my ideas. If you take a look at this, as it opens up here slowly, no. So if you look on here, I had some basic ideas. And I'm walking through, I'm trying to, titles, having to come up with a title sometimes helps me. Often if you're invited to do a talk, they want it to have a title. I used to think that was a real pain, but now I've come to see it as sort of helpful, as another heuristic for helping me narrow in on an idea. So I'm just really trying to throw out all the stuff I have into this basic document. Then I cogitate on that for a few days, and then you'll notice here on the 11th, I'm pulling this into a bigger draft. So here you can see I've got a bunch of smaller points. It's still pretty embryonic. I don't have a lot of evidence on there, but this gives me a time, and you'll notice after I've done this for a few days, I want to reflect a little bit. So I had some thoughts on goals, and I'm really asking who is the audience here and what should the talk do? So I look at that. I even go in here and I list constraints and opportunities. I haven't revisited this in about a year or so. So I'm trying to think through what are some of the constraints, what are my opportunities, what are the goals of this presentation. I had some general goals when I started work on it those 5 days before, but now I'm really making another cycle through this. Then I've got a different, this is same day, now this is starting to look more like a draft in here. So I've got evidence that I've looped in. This is now, I now am probably in that first phase. So all of these are probably in that planning stage. I'm just trying to pull my ideas together. Then this is that first major outline. Here I've got something looking like key points. I've got an opening, I've got sort of a first point, I've got a second point, a third point, and a conclusion. But it's a whole bunch of stuff on here. So I would have run that. I would have run that, and then you'll notice later that night, so on the 13th and the 13th, so I ran that a couple of times, and then later that night I went in and I made some changes. So now let's see what I've done here. It's still a little long, but I've changed some things. I've made some adaptations. I've cut some evidence. I've included different evidence based on my experiences running that draft 3. So then I've got draft 4. Looks like I ran that on the 14th and then probably again on the 15th. So by the 15th, I can go back in and I make some pretty small changes. I'm starting to think through if I was just trying to headline the key ideas, what would they look like? So I've got some basic ideas, but I'd run and then I'd go back in. I got another draft. Again, it's got a lot of evidence in here. Now it's getting shorter, a little bit more targeted. Then I've got my draft 7 on the same day. I'm making some changes here. Now I've got a lot of evidence. So I've consolidated some points. So instead of having 2 or 3 separate points devoted to this, I take all the evidence and I put it under one new main point. So I've made some revisions based on that. Then you'll notice over the next couple of days, I revised the chunks. So instead of revising the whole thing, for this, I went in and revised discrete parts of the speech because they felt like different elements, different components. So this is kind of my revised version of chunk 3, chunk 1, chunk 2. I do a run through of each one of these. I've got some notes on performance. What did I say? I need more intro conclusion stuff. Final section felt pretty good. It needed more humor. It felt too pleading. Apparently I was feeling fairly desperate. I do one big run. I've got my time marked in here and also manually written on my script. So I've got a couple of small notes about the performance. Then I've got sort of my last major draft. Okay, here, this is pretty short. right? And it's tidied up, and I don't have all the evidence written out in full. Rather, at this point, I know what that evidence says. So I don't need to write out what used to take up half a page, what the NSSE evidence is. At this point, I know it, so I just got to remind myself that's where I talk about it. So this is a shorter draft. This gives me something to practice with. So you'll notice this was on the day before I delivered the presentation. So then I spend some time revising this short outline. So this is my talking outline. This is for a 45-minute talk about a page. And so I practiced a couple of times with this, made some revisions to this, printed it out, and took this one page with me to the talk. Once again, 45-minute talk, 15 minutes for Q&A. So I took this with me to the talk, and of course, when it came time to present, I didn't really even use this because I'd run it so many times and I'd made so many revisions, I just knew the presentation. If I needed to, this was there. And I never want to do a presentation without the capacity of notes, right, in case I do lose my way. But this is the end result of running it through multiple revisions. It took me a few days. It was a major presentation. It was a very large presentation. It was one important to me because I was presenting for colleagues and people who I held in high esteem. So I wanted it to be sort of a coherent presentation. But that's just a way of giving you another demonstration of what this process might look like. This, once again, I would hold up more as that ideal model. I did a lot of revising and a lot of drafting. Many of the other presentations I do will probably have something like the ideas, maybe something looking more like draft 4, and then maybe just the short outline. So it would have gone through a couple of versions, but not nearly as many as this one went through. Now, this process that I've been discussing is but one suggestion. As in all aspects of this course, if it is useful to you, use it. If it's not, set it aside. But this method has worked well for me and for many of the people I coach. And once again, it comes back to one of the key issues of this class, which is not simply being able to do a good speech, but becoming a good speaker. And becoming a good speaker requires getting a sense for what your unique delivery style is, what writing works for you and you in front of an audience. I will say there are some benefits to this method. And as the more I've grown to have faith in it. So if I'm doing a big presentation and I'm really trying, and it's something that it's a tough speech to get into line. So I'll do that first massive outline and I'll do that first pass. At the end of that first pass, I am marked by extreme despair. I mean, this has happened countless times in my house, in the basement, in my office. I'll walk around doing the speech, and at the end of that first pass, it's just, this will never happen. I am a failure. But I've done it enough times now where I'm like, know what? Just have faith. It'll all shake out in the end. This is draft 1, and it's going to go through 4 or 5 more drafts. It'll get there. So I've come to place a lot more faith in this. But the benefit is, by the end of running this process, I don't need notes. People often ask me, well, how do I memorize a presentation? You don't. You know the presentation, then you just do it. And the answer is, how do you get to know it? By doing it, by running it, by developing it in a way that you can deliver it. So by the end of this process, I don't need notes. I've written what I want to deliver, and I've practiced delivering what I want to say. So I would recommend that at least you try this process. Try it on the informative speech that you're working up for this class, or at the very least, the next presentation that you have to give. Give this process a whirl and see if it helps you out.